Well, good evening. Good evening. Thank you so much for coming to our 22nd annual convention. 22 of these things. It's awesome. As always, we're here to learn and to get better as individuals, better as teams, working together, so we can go faster and go farther with less effort. And, we're also here to celebrate. We have a lot to celebrate. We've all been working hard for a year, right? So we want to celebrate that. We're so happy you're here with us. Joe Rusk said earlier that coming here feels comfortable, like an old pair of jeans, he says. And that's great. That's well expressed there, Joe. And I hope everybody feels comfortable coming here. I see so many faces that I see, year over year over year. So it makes it feel like family. And then I see a lot of new faces, so that's great. Contractor Nation is a term that refers to everything that we do. It's new words, I know, and we're still getting used to those words, Contractor Nation here in Connecticut. And a lot of our communication to you doesn't say Contractor Nation on it because you're, one of the dealer networks. But saying team basement systems all the time when some of the things that we do have nothing to do with basements was getting a little awkward. So now it's Contractor Nation, and that includes basement systems, clean space, total basement finishing, Dr. Energy Saver, Treehouse Internet Group, Morehouse Finance, Attic Systems, and School of Entrepreneurship. And each year, as we have a bit of a tradition, we have a big cheer to see who's here involved with each of the different networks. So here's who's here involved with basement systems. Let me hear you. And how about clean space? Dr. Energy Saver. Total basement finishing. All right, fantastic. Well, it's been another big year here in Connecticut. We made tremendous progress on many fronts. We've trained thousands of people. And our School of Entrepreneurship has exceeded expectations and made a huge impact on many people. It's a leadership training program and provides training and tools and strategies for the leader to deliver and implement with his or her team. The school's live training and online platform are available to all in-network dealers free. So I'd encourage those not involved to talk to some of the other leaders who are involved and get involved with it. And we'll be talking more about the School of Entrepreneurship at this event. It's a game changer for those involved. 2 years ago, I showed you a project, an animation of a big project that we began. And I want to show you the animation again to show you what progress we've made. This year, we finished building 3 in the month that we predicted. It wasn't the year we predicted, but no, it was. So let me tell you about building 3. It's our newest building, and you'll see it on Tuesday. It's over 500 feet long. It has over 48 garage doors, and it's really amazing to us. But the truth is, we didn't have to move. We were doing just fine, where we were and the way we were. But I went and made a big investment to build what must surely be the most incredible home improvement contractor building in the world. Now, why? Well, I'll never be able to sell this building. Who wants to buy a building with 48 garage doors, a glass elevator, 1 loading dock, and a training center with a theater? Nobody wants to buy a building like that. I mean, this combination of resources are not very useful to anyone else. But this investment isn't an investment in real estate. It's an investment in everyone who works in it, everyone who visits it or is served out of it. It's an investment in us. There's 100 million homes in the United States and Canada where 360 million people live. And all these homes need to be taken care of. This building will be a home improvement contractor building long after we're gone. It'll be occupied by a new generation of employees in service to America's homeowners. And hopefully they're using our ideas and have improved upon our ideas to produce excellent results for their customers, their employees, their vendors, and their community. You know, I was down in Pennsylvania with my wife Wendy and my daughter Autumn, and we were at a horse show. And one morning I wanted to go running. And so I like to run in the woods, try to find some trails in the woods. And so I looked at Google Maps and I saw this big patch of green and it didn't look far away. So I said, oh, let me go there. And so it was only 5 minutes away and I park and I realized it's Valley Forge. Duh, I didn't know I was that close to Valley Forge. So I was getting a double treat here, running and seeing the Valley Forge Park at the same time. And it's rolling, green rolling fields with tree lines, and there'd be, you know, these old garrisons and redoubts, they call them, that General Washington and his army used, and there was, you know, a chapel, and you go a little farther, and there's these monuments and stuff. Well, I came upon this big arch monument. It was huge, and I run up to it, and I stopped to read what's on this monument, and one of the inscriptions here was written by Henry Arment Brown, and it was written about 100 years after Washington was there. In the 1800s, he wrote this, and it says this: "And here in this place of sacrifice, in this vale of humiliation, in this valley of the shadow of that death out of which the life of America rose, regenerate and free, let us believe with an abiding faith that to them union will seem as dear, and liberty as sweet, and progress as glorious as they were to our fathers and are to you and me. And that the institutions which have made us happy, preserved by the virtue of our children, shall bless the remotest generation of the time to come." I thought that was beautiful. You know, we're not at a moment where we're birthing a new country, and most of us aren't risking our lives, but we are giving our lives to our livelihood. And like the founders, we hope and pray that we've done something that'll survive us. And I believe we can, that we can improve the level of play in home improvement so that it's permanently elevated even after we're gone. That we are the forefathers of the modern home service age. And I want to thank you for being part of it. Please give yourself a hand. You know, I want to acknowledge something that happened last year. In 2008, Greg Thrasher and I started Foundation Support Works, and Greg told me from the beginning he wanted to build something for his children. And I told him I understood and I would never interfere with that. Well, last year, Greg called and said it was time, that they wanted to buy my half of the company. And while it wasn't my choice, I kept my promise. And we're still great friends and look to the future with much optimism. And I want to say that most contractors out there in the world have nobody to help them. But the contractors in this room who are Support Works dealers and a Contractor Nation dealer have two teams of incredible people that think about nothing all day except how do we help our dealers. So that is absolutely something to celebrate. You're very fortunate. Give yourselves a hand. The theme of our convention this year is impact. And I have some stories to tell you. Stories untold that are around us every day. Stories that originate around the world and wind up here in this place. You ready to hear some stories? All right, well, let's begin and see what we can find in these stories. And I'm going to ease you in, okay? You guys know we do a great job for people, right? I mean, you're the ones doing the work, and you hear it all the time, right? So you know we do a great job. Well, we got this one letter from a Minnesota customer 2 months ago. And this customer wanted to make sure that us in Connecticut, that we knew about the great service she got. She was gushing about American Waterworks and calling every American Waterworks employee by name and saying what a great job that they did at every contact point. Now, we know there's a lot going on behind the scenes to field a team of players like this. Steve Brilliant is the founder of American Waterworks, and while everything is rosy today, it never starts out that way. Steve recalls showing up in this, his first installation truck, A 1978 Bonneville with wall anchor rods sticking out of the window for his first installation. That was 1989. Countless trials and adversity have come since then. Droughts, recessions, and frozen Minnesota winters. And sometimes all of them at the same time. And through it all, Steve made it work. You know, we've heard that the customer comes first, but being in business 35 years myself, my observation is that's not true. The customer does not come first. Because without a team of trained, committed employees who have the right attitude, the right skills, the right ambitions and support, who work well together, the customer can never get great service. So it's employees and team first, then the customers. Today, American Water Works has 90 employees in Pine Island, Minnesota. They'll do over $10 million this year, and the team is doing really well, to the point where their customers feel they need to write letters all over the country telling others what a great job that they had. So we have Steve Breland with us here tonight. I'm going to continue with more untold stories for you now. Noel Harvey was born in Jamaica. His family came here when he was 13 years old. He has a tight family that he can rely on. But like many young men, there were plenty of bad paths beckoning him and his friends from the streets. It could have gone either way. At age 23, he got a job in production at Connecticut Basement Systems. He remembers rounding a corner and meeting me, the owner of the company. And he says he remembers I looked him in the eye, smiled, and shook his hand and welcomed him. At the time, his girlfriend was 5 months pregnant. Now, Noel came from a family where taking care of your children was seen as the sacred duty that it is. But he wasn't sure how he would do it without a steady place to work and an income he could rely on. He decided to give up any activity he had on the streets and commit himself to this career in this place. 2 months ago, Noel saw me driving through the back lot of Building 1. He was in his truck and he jumped out and he flagged me down. Noel, now a confident, skilled, and dignified man, approached me and stuck out his hand. He'd been a foreman for 20 years now and installed many thousands of jobs. He said he wanted to thank me because his daughter, Janadra, the one his wife was pregnant with when he started here, had graduated college with her 4-year degree and was going on for 2 more years. And he said it was all because of me. And I told him, no, Noel. You earned it. And him working here was much our victory as it was his. In 2010, Noel bought a house, and he has 3 children and has high expectations for each of them. Noel is with us here tonight. So back in January of this year, I find myself handing out giant bags of food to mothers and children I do not know in a place I have never been before, Panama to be exact. I look to my left and I look to my right and I see people I do know, dealers and their spouses, and they're handing out food too. How did I get here? Well, it was because someone asked if we'd be willing to get behind this project at our annual owners meeting. How did that happen? Well, this someone had been doing a lot of mission work in Central America before. This someone is Josh Smith from Master Service Companies. And Josh was down in Central America doing mission work because he had spoken to men and women in American prisons, giving them counsel and faith in themselves. And that happened because Josh was in prison himself at one time, on the other side of the bars. You see, a small step in the right direction at first and one thing leads to another, which leads to another. You keep doing that, and you can build a life of extraordinary service, no matter where you started out or where you wound up at one time. Leadership is initiative. It's looking and saying, this needs to be done, this should be done, and no one else is doing it, so I'll go first. Today, Josh has over 100 employees at master service companies in Knoxville, and they're still growing. And many of those employees were involved in setting up the trip to Panama, where for the 2 days before our owners' meeting, we went to poor villages and orphanages and did good works. Josh even had the governor, the mayor, and the head of the police force of the whole country involved with us the whole time. It was a huge effort, and it made quite an impact on the poor people in Panama for sure. Josh Smith is up with us here tonight. As a result of that trip, others got involved. We funded 3 churches to be built in remote villages in Panama. A group we found through Josh could arrange for materials to be hauled by donkey or horse or by hand on single-track trails for hours up to these remote villages in the mountains, and a simple building could be built for $6,000. The buildings look primitive for our standards, but it needs to shelter from the rain and be open because there's no air conditioning and no electricity. It turns out that in Central America, where many people live in poverty in remote areas, the church is a very important place. It's not just a church, it's the community center, it's the town hall, and really the central meeting place for the entire village. And we found out about how we could fund a church to be built in a village in a place that had a willing pastor, and this pastor had been giving church service under a tree for years. And all these pictures are churches that were funded by our dealers who jumped at the chance to fund a church. And one of them is up with us here tonight. It's Mike Woodford from Woodford Brothers. I want to continue and tell you a different kind of story. Actually, I'm not going to tell you this story. I'm going to let you hear it directly from her.
10 years ago, I went to a doctor's appointment and got on the scale in the hallway, and the nurse leaned over and whispered 310 pounds for my weight. And in that moment, I realized that I needed to make some changes if I wanted to see my kids graduate, get married, maybe have grandkids for me someday. And I was working at the deli at the time. I was a manager there. Pretty much what I thought I could accomplish in my life would be that job. I didn't have a college education, and in my day, that's what you did, fairly low-paying jobs. And Larry came in. I remember actually twice he asked me if I wanted a job, and the first time I wasn't ready to move on. And the second time, he started talking about a department that he was going to open, and I had no idea why he would think I could accomplish all of that, but he did. And I took the chance, and I started at Basement Systems, and I learned a lot in the last 5 years. And I'm very thankful that he saw so much more in me than I ever had seen in myself. I recommitted recently, probably in the last year, and I've been running, and I've done 2 half marathons. I cried both times as I crossed the finish line because I never thought I could accomplish that in my life. I honestly didn't even know that I'd ever see 50 at that point when I started 10 years ago. And now, 10 years later, I am 149 pounds and very proud of that. And I feel great. I feel as though my family definitely has benefited from my changes. I'm very happy, very healthy, and I plan to stay this way. And the biggest thing for a weight loss journey is that it's not a diet, it's a lifestyle. And people have to understand that. And you can't think in terms of how many pounds you have to lose. You think in terms of, I need to be healthier today. Don't doubt yourself. Take a chance. Put yourself out there. Believe in yourself. Believe in other people. And just do your best every day. And it's one day at a time. You don't worry about tomorrow. You just live today. And be the best you can be every single day. And that's all anyone can ask. I bought a dress in March. and I bought a size 10, and I took it back for alterations, and they wanted to charge me more than the cost of the dress for the alterations because they had to take it in 2 sizes. So we ditched the dress and we started over, and I have a size 6, and it's sleeveless and it's a halter, and I feel really good in it. Yep. And it's for my daughter's wedding. So yes, I am seeing all those milestones, and I'm seeing them a much healthier person.
Awesome. Our next story is about Kyle Goggins. He grew up in Dallas, Georgia. His father was a lineman and tried to get Kyle to go in that field like his older brother did. His older brother, as Kyle will tell you, was an overachiever, the kind of guy who would stay in from school recess to help the janitor clean the bathrooms, you know. Kyle was normal, but he felt a lot of pressure to be like his older brother. Kyle got a job with a contractor, and the very first day in the truck, the driver smoked pot, and the passenger offered him pills. Then he got a job at AquaGuard Basement Systems. His dad didn't want him to work there, which made Kyle want to work there even more. He remembers his very first day on the job and his very first crawl space. It was 18 inches high, dirt as hard as concrete. And as he remembers it, it was the worst crawl space he's ever worked in on day one. But Kyle worked hard and he stuck it out. He went through the motions 19-year-old males do, working during the day and partying at night. Kyle never felt comfortable with people his own age, so he hung out with people older than he was, always looking for something else and somewhere else. He ran around with people who did not have his best interest in mind. They were always there when it was time to have fun, but when there was trouble, they were nowhere to be found. One night, he was very drunk and didn't even remember leaving where he was. He remembers waking up behind the wheel and reaching to try to start the truck. That's when he noticed the engine coming through the dashboard on the passenger side and the oval hole in the windshield that his head had gone through. He woke up with bright white hospital lights shining down in his eyes as they put holes in his skull to relieve the pressure from his brain swelling.
So, after the accident, the first thing that I recall was, waking up in the hospital, laying on the hospital bed, and I was blinded by the lights above me. And I remember hearing, doctors frantically working all around me. I couldn't see, couldn't turn my neck, and couldn't move my whole body for that matter. And I had thought that I broke my neck. And for that moment in time, I thought that I was paralyzed. And being paralyzed is not something that you really fathom happening to yourself. So you see it in the news and you see it on TV, and that's when the reality hit. I can say that was the single most scary moment of my life.
Kyle didn't come back to work for 2 months, and when he returned, he had no driver's license. And a DUI cost a lot of money. He lived alone, and he managed to get a ride from where he lived to a gas station, but that ride was very early in the morning. And there, he waited in the winter cold for an hour each day until a coworker came by and gave him a ride from there to work. It was terrible, but he told himself he would not miss work. For several years, it was always, Kyle can't drive. How are we going to get Kyle to the job? He felt like baggage. But Kyle says it was a milestone in his life. He escaped death. Kyle's a shy introvert, a thinker, and he thought about his life and decided to make some changes. A breakthrough happens the moment you make a new choice. He knew he had to get away from the crowd he was hanging around with. And he did. He was lonely at times, but he didn't go back to them. Alcohol affects the way you look, and he didn't like it. So he joined a gym and got around new people, like-minded people, people who were trying to improve themselves and weren't drinking and partying all the time, where the conversation was different. He made new friends. He was in a relationship and realized that relationship was not good for him, so he left it. At work, he wanted to be a valued member of the team. He worked on his people skills, and he began to get a vision for his life. He set goals. He became a foreman and started running a crew. And when he realized that this career was the one he wanted to be in, he decided that he wanted to run one of the production divisions at the company one day. Pat Combs, a manager at AquaGuard, mentored Kyle, and every Friday they met to discuss a book by John Maxwell, How Successful People Lead. Today, Kyle's been with AquaGuard for 9 years. He doesn't drink much anymore, and he tries to be a role model for others. He still has a piece of the telephone pole in his house to remind him. He's into self-improvement. Imagine that. What a great thing to be into, self-improvement. His goal to manage a department has come true, and he says he takes care of his group. In fact, he told me a few stories. One young man came to his department and he was not doing well. He'd been in jail twice, and he moved around from crew to crew. And Kyle says it's easy to give up on somebody when they're new. But Kyle gave all he could to help him, and today that young man is a foreman. Another young man came to his group at over 300 pounds and little belief in himself. Today, that young man has bought 2 vehicles, a house, and looks like a Calvin Klein underwear model. Kyle can give so much direction and help others because he's been there. He's learned emotionally. Hard work and dedication, he says. Find something you're passionate about and pursue it. And Kyle believes in himself, and because of that, he believes in others.
Well, so today I'm working on 10 years of being with AquaGuard, and I can say I get the opportunity to wake up every single morning, come to work, be in an environment surrounded by people that impact my life every single day. And she doesn't know it yet, but just a little over a week from today, I'm going to be engaged to the woman of my dreams, and who's also helped make me the man that I am today. And I can honestly tell you that I love everything about my life, the good, the bad, and the ugly, because each one of them helped define me as who I am as a person. And, I thank God for my blessings every single day.
We have much more power in us than we give ourselves credit for. I believe that leadership can help bring out the best in others, encouraging them and inspiring them to try to give their best and to discover what they didn't already know about themselves. And I believe our organizations are a wonderful vehicle for us to cause this to happen. And once talents are unbound and efforts applied on a daily basis for the good of all, that we can make an uncommon positive impact in the world. Kyle is an example of that, and he's with us here tonight. Our next story is from someone most of you know well. Let's take a look.
I started teaching at 15 years old, music lessons, and I had a full schedule of students. And that drew me to being a special education teacher, which I was for 17 years at the same school. Well, during that time, I went back to school to be a school principal, and I graduated. So, of course, the owner of the school knew that I graduated and now I can become a school principal, and he calls me into his office, and he wanted to know, he asked me, so what are you thinking? What are your plans? What do you want to do now that you graduated and you can be a school principal? And I said to him, well, I'd like to be a principal here at your school. And he started shaking his head, and I knew it wasn't going to be good. And he says, no. Well, why? because you stutter. It's not the face I want to have for my school. So I knew at that moment I was not going to be able to do what I wanted to do as a career at my current place of work. And I've been working for Connecticut Basement Systems part-time as a salesperson. And about once every 3 or 4 weeks, Larry would send me a note through the email inviting me to join the team full-time. So I decided to give Basement Systems an opportunity. My very first day in the job, I'm working, and Larry comes up to my desk, and I'm like every newbie, I'm nervous, right? And he says, today we're going to make an audio recording of the Clean Space sales system. I'm like, great, can we start the day any better? You put a microphone or a telephone in front of someone who stutters, that's a big, big problem. Now, I asked him, is this going to be like a 30-minute audio, maybe a 45-minute audio? And he's like, oh no, about 3 or 4 CDs. 3 or 4 CDs, oh my gosh. So there we are in the audio booth recording the Clean Space sales process. And when we finished, I turned to the engineer and I said, look, you got to clean this up. I made a mess. I stuttered all over the place. And before I could even finish, Larry stops me and says, whoa, whoa, no. You're going to leave it just how it is. People listen to people who stutter. Don't change a thing. And right there, I knew I made the right decision to come to work for Basement Systems.
I have to tell you, Mike is about the most dedicated guy you ever want to meet. Mike will do anything to help you. The stories of him being on the road training and staying up till 1 in the morning coaching one salesperson are legendary. That's the kind of guy he is, and most of you know that. Mike Lane. I want to take you back to 1980. A man who never left his house without his cowboy hat and boots on. He owns 2 bars, one of them being the largest in Indiana. He's a larger-than-life partier, a real showman. He rides limousines, and he rides his horse right through the front door into his bar, often. Nightlife was his trade and his curse. He's an alcoholic, and he'd come home to his family and be very abusive. He'd get his gun out and shoot holes in the walls or shoot food cans right in the house. Among all this was his 10-year-old son, Bobby. Do parents have an influence on their kids? Of course. When Bobby was 17, he began hanging out in the bars too. And whenever the police had the handcuffs on Bobby, his uncle, who was high up in the Indianapolis police force, would get him off. How would we predict the future for a boy like that? Let's fast forward to 1996. Bobby has 4 children in a 15-year-old Astro cargo van that he used for his painting work. They're all in the back, sitting on 5-gallon buckets. Even the youngest, who was just 2 years old because they couldn't afford a car seat. They were always turning their gas and electric off. Things were very bad. At one point, Bobby's wife asked him to go give blood because that would bring in a few dollars so they could buy some food. What would we predict for the future of this family? In the movie, A Beautiful Mind, there's a scene where the main character, who has schizophrenia, is unable to watch his children, and he's unpredictable. Things are bad. His wife finally leaves with the baby. A few minutes later, she comes back up the stairs and kneels down in front of him and says, I need to believe that something extraordinary is possible. Then Bobby got an entry-level job with a basement systems dealer in Indianapolis as an installer. Fast forward to today, Loveland, Ohio. Bobby Miles, the boy that nobody expected anything from, not only has a job, but has provided careers for 53 other people. His company, The Basement Doctor, is growing to $12 million this year and building an addition to make their beautiful facility over 31,000 square feet. As Muhammad Ali said, only a man who knows what it's like to be defeated can reach down into his soul and find the power to win. Bobby has overcome a lot and learned lessons emotionally that he'll never forget. Today, he's a conservative businessman and takes his leadership job very seriously. Failure is not an option, he says. He and his kids talk about those old days often. His daughter, who's studying oncology at the University of Miami in Ohio, she says, "Dad, you're a miracle." Indeed, he is. My friend Bobby is with us here tonight. On September 10th, 1980, a little girl named Kim Anafantis was born in Brooklyn in the Marcy Projects. Growing up in one of the most dangerous housing projects in the United States is no fun. Drug dealing, gunshots, the whole bit. Then your father leaves. Then your mother is declared unfit by the state, and your 6 brothers and sisters are taken away to live in foster homes. The state tried to keep at least 2 siblings together in a foster home. This is Kim and her sister Sherry after they've been taken away from their mother. Holding on to each other, Sherry was the only constant in Kim's life. But still, moving to 8 different foster homes growing up leaves no sense of stability at all. This is Kim when she graduated high school, still living in a foster home. When she was 19 years old, Kim Anafantis was told she had to go now. The trouble is, she had nowhere to go. So she decided to go to college because she could live on campus, since she had nowhere else to live. But the loans she had to take out for school and student housing were piling up, and it was unsustainable. Then, a man 12 years older than her asked her to marry him. Since she had nowhere to go, she thought he'd take care of her and provide her a place to live. So she said yes. She had a baby girl, Cheyenne, the love of her life. But the marriage was not a good one. Kim suffered many humiliations, as he was overtly and repeatedly unfaithful. But she had a daughter and no way to support her daughter if she left. But if you live a life that seems to be pre-decided for you, it will lead you to a place you didn't want to be. And if we want to craft a life of our choosing, we must break away from those that have nothing good planned for us. And as Rumi said, take the first steps and the path will appear, because you're creating it. Kim decided she had to leave. She took her daughter and drove out of New York City to Connecticut. She made a custody agreement that seemed to make sense at the time. She would get custody of Cheyenne for 7 years, and then her father would get the next 7 years. The clock was ticking. Kim and Cheyenne lived in homeless shelters as Kim tried to build a life for her and her daughter. At the shelter, they provided you with a voucher for a rent deposit on an apartment. She did what a mother had to do. She rented an apartment with that deposit voucher, knowing she could not pay rent. She enrolled Cheyenne into the school district in the local area, and it would take the landlord 4 months to evict them. Not knowing what else to do, she'd go to the next town and do the same thing again. Cheyenne was always the new kid in school, and Kim cried at night because she knew how that felt from when she grew up. She told her ex-husband that they moved because she got a new job, knowing that he'd take her back to court if he knew that Kim couldn't support Cheyenne financially. Kim worked selling cars for a couple years and worked in an industrial supply where a crazed boss mistreated her. She barely managed as a single mom, living very sparsely, doing all she could. She got into another relationship where she and him had something in common: survival. She'd go back to family functions, and she wouldn't want to get drunk or high like the rest of them. And her own mother and siblings would call her things like high sedity and bougie, which means you think you're better than the rest of us, but you ain't. Through all of this, she kept her optimism for her and her daughter and hope for a miracle. Her years with her daughter were half over, and time was ticking. Now, Kim had seen the advertising for our company all the time and thought we'd be a good, stable place to work. So she came in and applied for an interview, but she didn't make the cut. A couple months later, she came in again and applied again. Again, she didn't make the cut. A year later, she applied for another position. This time, she was hired. That was 5 years ago. She found this job wasn't like any job she ever had. It was stable. For the first time in her life, she had stability around anything. After a while, she could afford her own place. And her current relationship was negative and bad for her. So she ended it and was financially able to stand on her own. For all she had been through, Kim never gave up. She's happy that her last years with her little girl, Cheyenne, she was able to give her a stable place to live and buy her some things, like this dress. Her 7 years were up, and it was time to let Cheyenne go live with her father. It was heartbreaking, but Kim, the survivor, who always figures out a way, managed to arrange it so she sees Cheyenne, the love of her life, every single day. And today, Kim says she's never been happier. Kim is a great employee and makes a great contribution at Basement Systems. She says she's never leaving, and I hope not. And this is what happens when good people cross paths with a good company, and an example of the good we can do in the world by getting it right. Kim is with us here tonight. Rosie Graves is the marketing director of Redeemers Group in Memphis. She grew up an only child in Syracuse, New York. She knew she had been adopted when she was 2 months old, and for 37 years she tried to figure out who her biological family was, with no success. Shortly after our build convention, with the help of Facebook volunteers called Search Angels, she had a huge breakthrough. On New Year's Eve, they had her sit down at a computer and directed her to a web page where on the screen before her, she saw a picture of her biological mother, who she looked just like. She contacted her mother right away, but her mother was reluctant to answer her back because she felt if Rosie found out about the family, Rosie would reject them. In fact, years earlier, Rosie applied to a TV show called Long Lost Family. And they had considerable resources to find her mother, and they did find her. But her mother would not confirm it. So the show got back to Rosie and said, "Sorry, we didn't find anything conclusive." Well, this time, 3 days later, her mother answered her daughter back. And Rosie, who grew up an only child, all of a sudden learned that she had 6 brothers and sisters. The oldest was Nicole. And Rosie found this photo of Nicole online and found Nicole's birthday was February 8th, the same as hers. In this picture, they look just alike. Rosie thought she had a twin. But she learned that Nicole was 3 years younger. And she discovered her sister and her were a lot alike, besides the fact that they looked like each other. But Rosie learned that Nicole had been in and out of prison. She had a drug problem, and her life was spiraling down. Rosie used to judge people like this harshly, but her career at Redeemer's Group expanded her world and her thinking in many ways. Knowing she had a sister who she never met, who was in trouble, so far away, Rosie felt helpless and desperate. But what could she do? Others told her if she got involved, she'd be public enemy number 1 to Nicole. What right did Rosie have, the sister from far away, who had her life together, who never met Nicole in person, in telling Nicole how to live her life? Rosie pondered this as she learned more. At this point, Nicole could not make decisions for herself. Nicole was on the streets in a free fall. And Rosie knew if she didn't do something, she may never get to meet her little sister. She listened to her heart, and she made a decision. And decisions equal destiny. Rosie used her networking skills to arrange a bed in a rehab center in Memphis, which isn't hard to get. Isn't easy to get. Then she made her plan with her uncle, who was a truck driver. He arranged a haul from Niagara Falls, where Nicole was at the time. He drove his truck north and picked up his cargo. And then he searched the streets of Niagara Falls for Nicole. He looked in places she was likely to be, but he didn't find her. He searched some more, and he searched again. No Nicole. Then he parked his truck and he waited. Finally, a car came by with Nicole in the passenger seat. The driver saw the 18-wheeler and sped off, but Nicole told him, "Go back." The car pulled up, and in a moment that would change lives forever, her uncle opened the passenger door, picked Nicole up, carried her to the truck, and put her in and closed the door. He drove from the Canadian border 939 miles to Memphis, Tennessee, and got Nicole into the rehab center. In Memphis, Rosie met Nicole for the first time under these circumstances. There was a long road ahead. They got to know each other with hours of quiet talks. They were so much alike. It's just that they took different paths in life. Rosie saw potential in Nicole if she could just continue her recovery. Rosie saw a fire in her sister. She knew that given the right tools and given a chance, Nicole would try to change the world. And those are the type of people you want on your team. Having her work for Redeemer's Group was a bad idea, wasn't it? I mean, what Nicole had been through is not anything any employer would roll the dice on. Was it? Doing simple things we take for granted were very hard for Nicole. She wasn't used to people doing anything for her and not wanting anything in return. She has to rebuild a life that's been torn down and has a long way to go. When Nicole got out of rehab, they did an assessment on her and found she would make a great marketing assistant. Rosie and Clint thought about this, and Clint interviewed Nicole some more and decided to hire her. And while the story is still being written, Nicole loves the company and is rebuilding her life with the grace she has been given at Redeemers Group. For Rosie, the awesome power of love won over judgment. She's with us here tonight. Some may be asking, where did you find all these people with such stories, right? And how do I convince them to share? Well, it wasn't hard. You know, we all have a story. Maybe they're different, but to us, there are stories. They're important, right? Look around. There's about 1,400 people here tonight. That's 1,400 stories. And for these people up here tonight, some didn't share their stories often, and some never shared them because to them, they weren't very good stories. But once they understood their stories could help others, they didn't hesitate and agreed to share them with 1,400 people all at once. That's generosity by putting yourself out there. And for that, we're grateful to the whole group. I wanted to tell you the story of two men, Allah and Bassam. They're both Iraqi refugees. Allah is trying to support his mother, two sisters, and his brother, but is unable to find a job. Bassam has been here for 5 years. He worked at 7-Eleven for $6 an hour and tried to support his wife, one child, and two sisters on that, which is not possible, of course. Then he got a job at Walmart for not much more. Two Iraqi refugees in America. What do we know about them? Do we fill in the blanks? Let me tell you more. Allah grew up around Baghdad. When he was 11, his father left the family with no one to support that family. And in their culture, women did not work and should not work. So to spare this from his mother, he went to work at age 11. He started as a laborer, and by his mid-teens was operating heavy equipment and driving an oil truck in the 2001 Oil for Food program. He worked up to 18 hours a day, and still his family depended on UN aid for survival. Allah worked hard and long at multiple jobs and eventually saved enough money to open a cafeteria and coffee shop. It was a dangerous and chaotic time in Iraq. There were various militias, corrupt secret police, and guerrilla units who owned the lion's share of all the other businesses and schools and hospitals and human services. Allah's business was in danger due to riots and civil unrest, government and militia scare tactics, and use of force. There was extortion, that is, Allah, if you don't give us a share of your business's revenue, we will kill you. Allah lost many workers due to civil movements and ethnic violence. Mahdi, Al-Qaeda, SSI, and other insurgent factions interrupted his business, which made Allah move his workers to a safer part of the city. Amid protests, movements, and civil war, Allah continued to provide for his family the best that he could. In late 2015, he grew worried that the insurgents following him to and from his home and business, using increasingly violent scare tactics, Allah had to run his business from a remote location, communicating sparingly with his manager and his workers, who included several women. And remember, women were not supposed to work. He had to close his business intermittently due to violence in the street. Then, Allah was tipped off by a friend. He evacuated his employees. And 2 hours later, a huge explosion destroyed the building. Allah went from a respectable businessman trying to support his family among absolute chaos to being destitute. He needed to remove his family from the dangers of their homeland. So they made the journey to Turkey as displaced refugees. There, through a magical stroke of luck, Commonwealth Christian Charities selected Allah and his family to bring from a refugee camp in Turkey to the United States. One in many thousands chance that this would happen. Bassam also lived in Baghdad. He initially worked for the Iraqi police forces before the government was shut down and restructured by U.S. forces in 2003. Bassam volunteered to work with the new government, the good guys, us. He volunteered to work with us, but was forced to do so in secret, leaving his wife and small child for weeks at a time and under great stress due to the insurgent violence. Bassam worked as an armed security guard, a UN aide. He worked at homeless shelters. He worked building barracks and bases in green zones and tactical and special warfare training in combat arms. Insurgents would come around his house and say, "Where's Bassam? Why is he not working for us?" Guerrilla units targeted the wealthy people, including Bassam's father, a well-known businessman, who had everything stolen from him. And within just a few years, his father died in secret at Bassam's home. During this time, ethnic tensions climbed as the first series of elections began in 2005, and violence hit its peak as the country faced civil war, extreme ethnic tensions, regular war crimes, and crimes against humanity. By this point, more than 1 million Iraqis had been killed, and more than 30,000 Iraqi women and children had disappeared during the ethnic disputes. Bassam volunteered again to train with the U.S. Army and U.S. Marines, understanding it would have put his family in grave danger. And when the U.S. handed over Iraq to the new government, because he had helped the United States, his family was watched, his movements were tracked, his phones were tapped, and his life was threatened. Surviving the day became breakfast time talk in his family. He found 2 death threats at his house in 1 week. He took his family, and they fled their home for fear of death. One day, Bassam noticed he was being followed. It was a convoy of insurgents, and the chase for his life began. At high speed, he was being shot at over and over as he raced down the highway to reconnect with his family. After being shot twice, he swerved his car directly into oncoming traffic, where he came face to face with another military convoy. Unsure of the blood feud in front of them, they drew their guns on Bassam. Bassam saw that by the grace of God, they were friendly. Now he had to show them that he was on their side before they shot him. He threw his ID badges at them. Then they trained their sights on the insurgents behind Bassam, who retreated. They took him in and provided protection and medical treatment. For the time, he found safety. Yet it would be another 7 months before he saw his wife and son again. A year later, the United States military brought Bassam to the United States to help train U.S. military personnel at Fort Eustis in Virginia. And that brings us back to the beginning of the story. 2 Iraqi refugees in America, unable to support their families. One of our dealers, Steve Tatro at the drying company in Virginia, gets a call from Commonwealth Christian Charities asking if they need any help. And they have these skilled Iraqi refugees available. Steve, in fact, does need help and has been having a challenge finding good guys. He finds out more. Today, Allah and Bassam work at the drying company in Yorktown, Virginia. They both say it's the best job they've ever had. They're diligent, optimistic workers, and were quickly accepted by the rest of the drying company employees. They're both finally able to support their families. They love the company and more than appreciate the opportunity they've been given. To this day, Bassam has to leave his job at the drying company for 5 days a month. Where does he go? To train U.S. military personnel at Fort Eustis. Tonight, we have our dealer, Steve Tatro, here. And I'd like to acknowledge one of Steve's employees. Antonia Hernandez has been in the U.S. Navy for 9.5 years and served all over the Middle East. Antonia is still in the reserves. She speaks Arabic and helped with our stories of Allah and Bassam. And I want to recognize her on behalf of all our U.S. military, past and present. At age 19, a young woman named Debbie, a flower child, had a daughter, Stacy. She left Stacy's father and hitchhiked down to Florida. There, she got pregnant again, and this time had a little boy named Jason. Debbie was a big partier, and soon had another boy, Jason's little brother, Chris. Debbie moved around with her 3 kids, aimless wandering. She dated unsavory characters. One of them put a Bowie knife through the door. Jason recalls his mom barricading the door when the cops came to evict them, and she stuck a shotgun out the window. In those days, the cops just left because there was kids in the house. They moved to one house, and Jason assumed they'd be there for a while. But soon, the landlord told them to leave. Jason was just 9 years old and remembers them walking down the street with just the clothes on their backs. Nowhere to go, just walking. Mom and 3 kids, just walking. They got to their uncle's house, and he shouted that they couldn't stay there, and he slammed the door. Debbie started doing crack every day. At age 16, Jason's sister Stacy started smoking crack with her mother, and they were prostituting together to get the money. Sister Stacy had a baby at age 16, but lost custody. One day, Mom called and asked Jason's sister, Stacy, to come pick her up, but Stacy was strung out, and she couldn't. So one of Stacy's customers had a car and offered to drive Jason's little brother, Chris, to get his mother. The guy was badly intoxicated, but Chris was only 11 years old and didn't know not to get in the car. When the car hit the pole, it ejected Chris through the windshield. He bounced off that pole, and as he lay in the road, he can see through the open passenger door the driver with the steering wheel bisecting his skull, dead. Chris was in a full body cast for a year. Living in a house like that, Jason didn't care. He wasn't going to school. An uncle by marriage asked Jason to come live with him in the suburbs. It was culture shock for Jason, but he went to trade school and he learned carpentry, which he liked and did really well at. Jason was going back and forth to see his mother at times. His sister Stacy had another baby. And one day his mother left the 2-year-old with Jason's younger brother and a couple friends, and the little boy ran out into the street between 2 cars and was killed by another car. Amidst all this chaos, Jason began dating a woman who was 10 years older than he was, but it was all the wrong people. And Jason ended up homeless, living under a bridge, literally living under a bridge. He had nothing, no thing, no home. The shoes on his feet had holes in them. And each day, he'd lay down on the concrete and pray to God that he didn't wake up in the morning. At age 22, he went to prison. And when he got out, he swore he'd never go back. But soon enough, he was back in jail. His mom died from a heart attack from drug abuse. His uncle died from an overdose, and his aunt died from alcohol abuse. We're all fighting a great battle between who we are and who we could be. We need courage. And courage is not the lack of despair, it's the ability to move forward in the face of it. A Native American boy was sitting with his grandfather high on a hill looking at the valley below. He saw that his grandfather looked conflicted. What's the matter, grandfather? Two wolves are fighting inside me. One is full of pain, envy, hate, and fear. And the other is full of hope and joy and love and forgiveness. Which one will win, grandfather? The one I feed. 18 years ago, at age 25, Jason got a job at Connecticut Basement Systems. I don't recall if he left something off his resume or anything. Could check that. At first, he just wanted a job. He became a helper on a crew. Then he became a crack repair technician. But when he became a service technician, he realized he could really make a difference. He discovered his talent. And when people discover their talent, they begin to believe in themselves. You see, Jason never gets rattled. He's seen it all. You can't rattle this guy. And he only looks forward. He never looks backwards. He developed these two qualities to survive. And now these two qualities are his superpower. He's found a home. It's the job of each of us to discover our talents, why we were put here on this earth, and to follow that path. And Jason invested his talents and developed specific skills and discovered new talents. Today, Jason is a production manager and special situations service manager. Jason's talent, as he will tell you, and as everyone will tell you, is to walk into a home with an upset or confused customer who has a problem, and to leave with a happy customer who no longer has a problem and has likely bought something else that they need. You know, you aren't responsible for your childhood, but you are responsible for your adulthood. At the time Jason started working with us in 1999, he met a girl who is now his wife. They have 10-year-old twins, and everyone is doing great. He's found his path, and he's a rock star in our world, and we're lucky to have him. Ladies and gentlemen, Jason Wood. So where do all these stories lead us? Here, in this room. Could this have happened in corporate America? No way, right? Apparently, it happens here all the time. Our businesses are places where people blossom into the people they were meant to be. We are absolutely having an impact in the world, aren't we? And if you are normal and have lived a happy life, I don't want you to feel left out tonight. You have a job to do, and that job is to keep believing in yourself and your higher potential, and to help others around you believe in themselves when maybe they don't or they're not sure, and to reach out to someone who is really down without judgment, but with love instead. This is our job here. We, all of us in this room, represent tenacity, dreams, faith, charity, persistence, aspiration, devotion, determination, optimism, love, grace, duty, and perseverance. And here in this place of sacrifice, in this vale of humiliation, in this valley of the shadow of that death out of which the life in America rose, regenerate and free, let us believe with an abiding faith that to them, life will seem as dear, and liberty as sweet, and progress as glorious as they were to our fathers and are to you and me. And that the institutions which have made us happy, preserved by the virtue of our children, shall bless the remotest generation of the time to come. Thank you.